Hello and welcome to the third video of the book we were looking into, titled Revelation of Genesis, the Lost Ages from Ethiopian Manuscripts of an Anonymous, in 8 volumes, by Francis Rother, translated by him from the Amharic into English. We're looking at the review, the comment. It's really lengthy. We've already covered it audio wise in our first video, and what they have to say here within it. It reads, within the next short time there will soon appear a new global political system structure. It will be a combination of the old order and the new order. Okay, so we are looking at the Galilean Aramaic translation of Revelation chapter 17, where it indicates in the footnotes a world empire that gets set up. Okay, it's talking about at that time, 2015, when the translator Victor Alexander actually translated it, then got it published into his Disciples New Testament, or the Aramaic New Testament that we have bought from him. Okay, it's talking about the certain people that attack Rome, the Vatican, etc., and destroy it, and all those kings of the earth, all the elites, etc., that sucked up to basically Protestant churches, leaders, etc., etc., those in authority for her wealth, her trade, etc., etc. They are crying from afar, oh look, it's been destroyed, she's no more, we're going to end up broke, okay, because she was our main source, she was the power, all this sort of stuff, this mother church, this city, etc. She's gone, what the hell are we going to do, that sort of thing. Because God appoints these certain peoples that hate her, can come in and destroy her. He's given them the authority to do that for so long, right? Here in the Galilean Aramaic Revelation, it says, for Allah, or God, has put it in their hearts to do His will only, and give their kingship to that demon until these words of Allah, or God, are fulfilled. So there's a demonic force behind it, right? It's a payback. That's why Christ warned, get out of her, flee from her, my children, my people, right? If you're a believer, okay, and you're like really devoted, all that sort of stuff, you've got to get out of this one, this particular false church, with a false leader, etc., etc., because there'll be a disposition of that false church and the demon who bears her, right? It gives her that authority, the one who has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The demon that you saw, John, was going to be, and he was destined to rise out of the abyss and go to oblivion. So he's coming out of the pits of hell, right? The darkness. He's chained there, and then he's going to go to oblivion. He's going to perish. Okay, he's going to be no more. The dwellers of the earth will be amazed, and those whose name is not written in the book of life from the foundation of the universe, as they see that demon who was going to be and he was not going to be, and as he fought. He's going to do battle. So they're amazed at it. This is where the mind that has wisdom manifests itself, it reveals itself. These 7 heads are 7 mountains over which that woman sits. This is where the Vatican, etc., sit. The 7 hills of Rome. And the kings are 7, 5 of which have fallen. So these were powerful, all powerful, etc., but they died. They're all dead, right? At this point. But one of them is, and the last one is yet to come, and when he comes he will have little desire to rule. See, he don't care about being a king or sitting on a throne or anything like that. He doesn't give a stuff, right? It's not what he wants. It's not what he wants to do. He has no desire to rule. And the demon, that's the force behind him, who is going to be and was not going to be, and this one is the 8th king, right, or ruler, but comes from the 7th, and it's a destroyer. So he's a oblivinator, according to the footnotes here. 1711. Literal Aramaic idiom, oblivinator. So he's a total destroyer, lays everything to waste. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings. Those people who have not yet been crowned, except authority as kings is given to them for 1 hour with that demon. Footnote indicated here. Okay. They only have one desire in their power and authority that they give to that demon, their allegiance to it, their loyalty. These will fight with the Lamb, because that's, in other words, they're not of God. They're ungodly. These will fight with the Lamb. Who's the Lamb? The Son of God. And the Lamb shall be victorious over them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And those with him, that follow him, right, come with him, when everybody sees him in the clouds, etc., etc., or amongst the people, and this is what Rocco Errico says, it's not in the Eastern mindset that he's going to be seen up in the clouds, for the people behind him, sort of thing. All his the ancient followers that died and with him, or the angels, whatever, right? He's talking about amongst the people. Okay, he's going to come back amongst the people, so he'll be seen amongst the clouds, on the clouds, which means amongst the people, right? These will fight with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall be victorious over them, for he is the Lord and King of kings, and those with him are called and the chosen and the faithful. And he told John, the waters that you saw where that prostitute sits, they are the nations and peoples and motherlands and tongues. So there's that possibility that this Rocco Errico is actually wrong. He's referring to the Eastern mindset, because they think completely different to the Western, right? Us Westerners. Because here it says that he comes back and all those that followed him around are with him, right? The chosen and the faithful. And the 10 horns that you saw in that demon, they hate the prostitute. That's a false church. It's a false religion with a false prophet, false leader. And they will lay her to waste and leave her naked, and they will eat her flesh and set her aflame. So basically, all the goodies that she has, all her valuables, they will grab for themselves. They'll consume it, right? And then set her on fire, destroy her completely. For Allah, or God, has put it in their hearts to do His will only, and give their kingship to that demon until these words of Allah, or God, are fulfilled. This prophecy, right? And the woman that you saw is that great city, which rules the kings of the world. They all suck up to it. Okay, so that's the Vatican, etc. They all pledge allegiance to the Pope, and so forth, right? All these Protestant churches and so forth, all these elites, kings, queens, and etc. Yeah, it's got it down here in the footnotes. Okay, they make her like ruin, right? They totally destroy her. 1716, literal Aramaic idiom, make literal Aramaic idiomatic expression, burn her with fire. Okay, totally destroy her. Okay, and this supposedly at that time, 2015, okay, or earlier, or maybe it was like 1998 or something like that, when the Soviet Union was formerly called, right, Russia, it was Soviet Union, and its satellite states were abundant. Okay, but later on, maybe 1998, whatever, it was changed, it was destroyed or changed or whatever, right? Okay, to the United Soviet Republic or something like that. He's indicating here in the footnotes that it means a world empire will be made. Okay, that will rise up and destroy it. Okay? Destroy the Vatican, destroy that particular false church, because it's God's will. Yeah, so here it's got literal Aramaic idiomatic figure of speech, his kingship upon those particular people doing his will. 1718. Approximately present day at this point of the vision. So this is at this particular period, but this, as we indicated, it was like printed, translated, then printed, published as the Book of Revelation of the Aramaic New Testament, or the Disciples' New Testament, translated by native-born Aramaic-speaking translator Victor Alexander from Mesopotamia, Syria. Yeah, around about 2015. Yeah, so it's going to be totally destroyed, right? And the world will gather the armies, etc., supposedly, and go and try to attack the Christ, to defeat the Christ, but they get wiped out, and then that's a big barbecue lunch or big dinner for all the birds of the sky, for ages and ages, that sort of thing, according to these scriptures. Okay, so go back to this person's comment. So pretty accurate there. It is true that some of the material presented in this guy's comment, this person's comment below, may seem a bit unusual at first to people, especially if you're not in the West, maybe Eastern people, right? He's talking about. But these are unusual times to be living in. The people who made these plans are the same ones who have been directing the affairs of the world since the 1850s, probably the Rothschilds and all that sort of stuff. All that stuff that is spouted by conspiracy theorists and all that sort of stuff. They're the ones who controlled the British Empire. Say there'll be more. Prior to that, over the centuries, it was the British Empire that controlled everybody else. They came, they conquered, they stole their resources, all that sort of stuff. And these people became under the British Empire, the Commonwealth, and still many countries that are. They try to break away, but like Australia, etc., or Scotland rather, you shouldn't, because, and then they're really dependent on them, so they don't do it. Okay. They are also the founders of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which directed by the British Empire and the birth of the European Union. They were the followers of the hidden intrigues and commands of Ruskin and Milner, who they were. They included such figures as Toynbee, the Huxleys, that'll be Aldous Huxley, created that book, The Brave New World, and his son, that basically was saying the same sort of things as him, who founded and ran UNESCO, and H.G. Wells, a famous author, who wrote propaganda for the coming order. He did The Time Machine and War of the Worlds, all that sort of stuff, in the form of novels. H.G. Wells also wrote non-fiction as well, and he also wrote The History of the World, which we have a copy of, right? We should almost be remiss if we failed to mention, or this guy failed to mention, old Van der Post, the occultist who was a personal mentor to Prince Charles, now King Charles. But the information about the global impact of this new political alliance will affect everyone, especially those in Asia, Africa and other parts of the world that do not yet know what will soon happen. Yeah, they control everybody. Okay, it'll be for everyone. Everyone comes under their boot heel. It is still important to document, demonstrate enough for help for others to be able to understand what is happening. Even if these sources seem a bit strange or unusual, please understand that the average person in the West does not have much understanding of what is happening, especially as much of the planning and development is hidden by some within the political class. So you know so much, but you don't know it all. Okay, it's secret squirrel stuff, right? Until the very last moment. For the record, it should be noted that almost all the regular and ordinary people who live in the West do not want to do harm to anyone. They only want to live their own life in peace. Yeah, they haven't got time to dwell into this stuff and whatever. Some of them are just totally not interested in that. It's hard enough to live, worry about that. But in many cases, the leaders of the government in the West and themselves not in control of their own government, are not in control of them, right? The same is also of nations in Africa and blah blah blah. It goes on about that. Pretty much true there. Okay, this includes the governments in Islamic states. Those nations are increasingly under control of Mahdist elements who are determined to bring in an Islamic Messiah, whom they hope will rule the planet for a period of chaos and war that will last 7 years. These groups are called Twelvers in the West because they are trying to usher in the appearance and rule of the 12th Mahdi, also known as Messiah number 12. There is documentation on the individual, and he is part of these rulers, of 3 rulers, who will rule over the earth for 7 years, according to the ancient book of Revelation, where John had this vision, or was shown these 3 unclean frogs. Okay, well, when we were in the church listening to a Tuesday meeting, a night meeting, they said, it's fundamentalism, something else and something else. We can't remember exactly what he said, but yeah, there's these 3 elements, right? Okay, There's documentation supposedly on the individual, and he's part of these 3 rulers who will rule over earth for 7 years according to the ancient book of Revelation. Well, we don't believe that it's really saying that. Okay, we haven't found that it actually says that. The book of Revelation is the last book of the Bible, you know that. There are many books in the Old and New Testament that describe him. Only, unfortunately, the 10th ancient books, unfortunately, the 12th Imam is not the Messiah that those in Islam currently think he is. If people personally studied the ancient books for themselves, such as the Old and New Testament, they would find answers. Yeah, you find the correct answers. Okay, you probably won't find it in these modern versions. That's why we represent the original ancient Galilean Aramaic, translated in English by a native-born Aramaic-speaking translator, Victor N. Alexander from Mesopotamia, Syria, right? Yeah, it is true that people become like the God they worship. If the God they worship is a God of love, peace and kindness, then that is what the followers become like. If the God they worship is a God of war, it is the God they worship, and he's one of forced conquest, denying basic liberties, treating people as though they have no value or they're worthless, and not a God of love or kindness. Then that is what the followers become like. The soon to arrive Messiah will arrive using peace, but will then turn to war. And this, that's according to scriptures, that's pretty much correct. And this soon to happen, religion itself will not be Islam, but rather Chrislam, a combination of both political Christianity, Islam and occultism. There are systems at least as old as the Vatican, which represent political spirituality and not genuine Christianity. Okay, so maybe they're hinting at, there's a possible Armageddon coming up, end of the world scenario sort of thing. Yeah, possibly. Okay, but if we look at the book of Revelation, it's translated from the Galilean Aramaic, it's very different. Okay. Most people cannot discuss these topics because they do not understand the spiritual dynamics that are involved in global politics. Those involved in the occult do have a name for the process. The process of taking control, it is called the externalization of the hierarchy. This is when those who are the fallen angels in control of the top occult groups in the world unveil themselves to their followers and to some others as the leaders of the dark forces. Some of them will materialize in physical form. It is called the externalization because this is when the evil spirits go from simply being controllers on the inside in the hidden and spirit world to being external overt controllers in some cases, announcing themselves and taking on actual physical form, which is when they are externalizing. They have been practicing this unveiling every year already in the higher mountains, often in Asia, and that occult occurrence and festival is known as the Occult Festival of Wesak. However, more and more it is the dark occult spiritual element in all nations and all governments that's taking control. Those dark forces try to resist people finding true liberty in the spirituality of freedom by understanding who Jesus Christ actually was and is, and how to have eternal life and forgiveness of sins. This can be obtained by anyone and is entirely free because the price was already paid, right? So it's free. And salvation cannot be attained by the good works of individual humans. Well, it's a base of a mixture of works and faith, or faith and works. Okay, because the Spirit moves you to give to the people that have less than you, people sitting on the street, there's somebody needs something to eat, etc., etc. Yeah, that's the Spirit, that the Spirit drives you to do that. Okay, so it's a mixture of faith and works, but you can't rely on just works. Okay, think you're going to get into the kingdom of God because you did all these kindnesses, gave to this charity, that charity, gave to this person, that person, right? Okay, because you've got to have faith. Okay, believe that Spirit is moving you to help these people. But then you've got to have discernment because people use you and abuse you. Now, he's a sucker, I'll just take it for everything he's got. These people out there like that. They have that hidden intention, right? But they're not going to tell you that. Salvation is free and cannot be attained by the good works of individual humans. Islam claims to understand Jesus Christ, but the words of Moses and the words of Jesus Christ are found only in the Christian Bible. the Galilean Aramaic one as well, etc. The old manuscripts from 2,000 years ago, and so forth. From the Apostolic Church of the East, they hid it and therefore preserved it for over 2,000 years. So, and many accurate copies that do exist. Yeah, okay, if you're trying to say that it's the Roman Catholic versions coming through from the American Bible Society, you'd be incorrect. They're very Americanized, they're very messed with, corrupt, etc., etc. Yeah. Things have changed, things have been left out. Okay. There's many out there in these churches, these pastors that tell you that. Okay, it goes on and on. But it's true spiritual freedom. And then says the accurate text of the New Testament. Okay, what's this? These New Testaments all say the same thing. Not necessarily. When they're translated, these interpolations, transliterations, etc., they can vary. They can say different things, right? Not all say the same thing. As you can see that on BibleHub.com. When they give the different verses, there's 3 or 4 that are completely different, right? In wording. If you are not reading from a Bible that has been changed, the accurate text of the Old Testament, even the old accurate text in ancient Hebrew, which both agrees with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's also the same Hebrew text used to translate the Old Testament into other languages, is still available. Okay, so is this person saying that you have the original ancient Hebrew? Because you don't. Okay, you don't have the Tab Ivri, because it's a very old, ancient language. It's very, very old. It's no longer written, no longer spoken by people today. Okay, what you have is a modern Israeli Hebrew. Yeah, it's revised from the 1900s. You don't have the original ancient Tab Asher, Ivri, or Hebrew, right? That Moses, etc., spoke. The prophets spoke. You don't even have the original Tab Asher. Okay, well, if this one is copied by scribes and monks in Ur-Hai in 800 BCE, right, and it was part of the hidden manuscripts of the Apostolic Church of the East, well, then you have those originals, don't you? If those are the originals, which they profess are, okay, as well as the New Testament ones, because Thomas, somebody was literate within the circle of the disciples that followed Jesus around 24/7, 365 for 3.5 years. I was missing, right? Before he died, was resurrected and ascended back to his Father in the kingdom of God, right? Thomas apparently handed over what they'd written down. So somebody there was literate. Somebody there had a brain and could write, etc., etc. Probably someone like Matthew, who was supposedly a Greek, but his tax collector, so he would have been familiar with writing and numbers and calculations, all that sort of stuff. So somebody amongst them wrote it down, okay, whether it be in Galilean Aramaic or Koine Greek or whatever. Somebody wrote it down, okay, and then later on people made copies, or a copy, right, in the Apostolic Church. Around probably about the 4th, 5th centuries, maybe. Okay, so this person goes on about aliens and stuff. Okay, why we see that? Okay, you can't really rely on these modern versions is because even the King James version, it's been translated. This person says it's the Geneva Bible, but what we've found is that he didn't like these Genevicists, right? He didn't like their version, okay? Because what he wanted to do apparently was he wanted to do what he wanted to do. Anything that came up, he wanted, being the king sitting on the throne, he wanted total power, right? So if he wanted to divorce like Henry VIII, couldn't, because it's a Roman Catholic sort of thing, right, or whatever, he was told, you can't do that. He says, I'm the king, I'm sitting on the throne, I'll do what I want, when I want, with who I want, how I want, whenever I want, right? So he called for a new translation in English, in Old English, for that specific Church of England, because they just got over the Roman Catholic rule. All the people were happy with him, for doing that. Look at the old, really old, like 1966 version of the King James. It should have the dedication of the people to the then Prince James, i.e. King James, thanking him for that, right? He liberated them from their yoke and so forth. So that's what he did. He wanted to have total rule. And people say, oh, like the Stephen Anderson guy, etc., say, oh, okay, King James only, because they're King James onlyist, etc., etc. It was authorized to be read in all the churches of the world. Baloney. It was authorized to be read in the churches of England. Okay? It was all solely for the people, the mass of the Church of England, or the churches of England. So don't fall for that baloney. Okay? Then this person goes on about it being accurate, text in ancient Hebrew. Again, no, because you don't have the original ancient Tav Ivri. Okay? You might have a form of it, which is a modern version of it, okay, a modern translation of it, but it's not that original form. It's a different kind of form, or different form. Okay. It both agrees with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is supposedly written in Aramaic. It is also the same Hebrew text used to translate the Old Testament into other languages. Yeah, that would be the modern Hebrew, right? Not that ancient, very old, long dead Tav Ivri or Hebrew that Moses, etc., spoke. So the King James Version apparently is the accurate text of the New Testament. Well, we can prove by looking at Mark 15:34 and Matthew 26, 27, 46, that the translation of Eloi, or Eloi, my God, which is correct. Why have you forsaken me is incorrect, because God doesn't forsake anyone, not even his son. Okay, so it's wrong, because the word there in the Galilean Aramaic that he uttered is wherefore, which indicates why have you abandoned me. Okay, it implies, Father, why have you abandoned me for my destiny? It's talking about wherefore indicates destiny. Okay, so yeah, there's an inaccuracy right there. Okay, from the Greek. Okay, said to be of the Koine Greek, maybe not. Okay, maybe it's a more modern Greek, a Latinized Greek, etc. Not the classical Greek, or Koine Greek, or Attica Greek. Okay, so this person is trying to say that the King James is accurate. We just pointed out it isn't. Okay, then he goes on about using a 1828 edition of Webster. Why not use the Britannica or something like that, which is probably about the same age, right? About 250 years old. Yeah, okay, so you could probably use that. Instead of reading modern English versions of the Bible, so you got to read this 1828 edition of Webster instead of reading the modern English versions of the Bible. They're bad and poor translations. He's accurate there, but why are you reading a dictionary?